should warn you that Russell's got a very rare condition that makes him invent wild stories.
Yeah.
He really does believe them to be true, so just thanks for humouring him during his speech. Right, cheers guys. Is that better? Can everybody hear me? That's better. Okay, well, if I can offer a warm welcome to everyone here today, and I'm sure, like Pete, you're amazing, shocked to be here too. Before I can say, I'd like to say a few thanks as well, basically to everybody. I think everybody's been thanked well. Sort of say as best man, thank you to everybody for making it possible for Pete and Kathleen, making it so special as it has been. Now, it's fair to say, after Pete had unsuccessfully run around everyone else, it was a real honour that he asked me to. I can remember now, after I said yes, and he'd written a cheque, there's a real feeling of comradeship. In fact, I almost missed Countdown, such were the emotional celebrations. I'm joking. I've got Sky Plus. All jokes aside though, Pete, this is a great honour for me as your best man and your best mate. And I just want to say thank you for being an absolute top bloke and a best friend. Those of you that know me will know that Pete and I go back quite some years. Pete, it has to be said, will be more than eager to express that I go back quite a few more. But the reality is, everyone thinks he's older than I am. I met Pete when he was about 18 and I was in my mid-20s. I was in full-time work, he was in full-time college, dicking about like he's always done. I used to visit Pete at Aberystwyth University where he was studying economics. Although, ironically, judging by his financial position during the time, I wouldn't say the course was having any real From that point on, and for many years to follow, Pete and I spent many an hour indulging in the finer things in life. Although, as Pete was a student, that usually meant 20 Embassy Regal and a 2-for-1 offer at Wetherspoons. Now, Pete's always been known to be a ladies' man, even back in his younger, frivolous days. When Pete left his hometown of Solihull to start university, he'd been seeing a local young lady who it seemed he was quite fond of. But several weeks into being at university, he called me to say that he'd broken things off with her, and that he'd also began seeing another girl who he'd met in Aberystwyth. I inquired what had brought about the sudden change of heart, and he replied, it was simply he couldn't see the relationship going any further, and it was time to call it a day. I remember then going up on one of my many weekend visits to see Pete, and I was finally introduced to Pete's new girlfriend. It became very clear to me immediately at that point what had swung it for Pete, and as I said hello to his new girlfriend, I couldn't help find myself staring helplessly at the biggest pair of breasts I ever. Now, if you didn't know, Pete has an absolutely superb singing voice, and he decided to take up playing the guitar. I remember him saying to me how he'd always loved the guitar, and there were a couple of lads at university that played there themselves. Before long, his mum and dad had bought him a guitar, and he was learning morning, noon and night, progressing very, very quickly. I remember visiting, once again, on one of my many visits to see Pete, and seeing him sitting there, singing his heart out, and playing with some quite amazing expertise for somebody who'd only been playing guitar for a short while. I also remember seeing him adorned by a group of young ladies, all sitting there, starry-eyed and transfixed by this young, talented lad. And I remember them thinking, yeah, I can see why he wanted to play the guitar. As a friend, Pete is protective and defends those around him that he cares about. So much so that when a particularly ugly character had an altercation with his friend Alan, who's here today, Pete decided to stick up for his chum and went to teach the scoundrel a physical lesson. His fist flew through the air like something out of a Bruce Lee movie, now on course for a powerhouse punch right on the end of this idiot's chin. But he missed. The fist continued on its now unstoppable perpetual journey, around and past the very thing it was meant to hit in the first place, and now taking Pete with it. He ended up in a spin, his legs got knotted, and he went down hard using the side of his face to cushion the fall as he smacked off the edge of the curb. Needless to say, he was in a bit of a mess and had to go to hospital, but it was a fair price to pay, however, to stick up for a mate.
It's absolutely true.
But
You remember it.
But we're way since those days, and Peter's come a long way too, with his 2-1 degree in economics. And it's great to see Peter's ended up in the ultra-sexy job of being a door escalator. If you thought window salesmen were boring, you should listen to Pete babbling on about automatic doors, sensors, and the do's and don'ts of door installation. Actually, Pete actually left the company he works for now for a short time, and then decided to go back due to being unhappy in his new job. I remember saying to him when he was unsure if he was making the right decision, well, Pete, as one door closes. Pete is truly a dear friend of mine, and I have to say, there's one thing about him that sets him apart from anyone else I know. His laugh. Sounds like a cross between Scooby-Doo's chuckle and a donkey. I've been in public with Pete, and people have actually been staring across, such is the disbelief that people create such a sound. I can only imagine, Kathy, you've learned to deal with it as best you can. Our hearts go out to you. Now, Pete, if you didn't know, isn't the most adventurous in the food department, and gained a reputation of being overly fussy with regards to what he was prepared to eat.
OTB.
To that end, he became known to his friends as OTB, which stands for One Taste Bud. And this seems to describe perfectly his restricted diet. But whether it's been pointing out your single taste bud or your single eyebrow, or that ridiculously scary laugh you possess, we've all had a great time, mainly at your expense, but you've always taken it in good cheer. I'd like to bring this to a close by saying that when Pete and Kathy came together, it was soon, very obviously, that she was the one for him. Kathy's warm personality, her endearing qualities, of course her beautiful looks, have left me in no doubt Pete is in the safest and most caring hands. I can't express enough how happy I am for both of you, and I know you will have many, many, many happy years together. And so I should now like to propose a toast to Pete and Kathy, and for all the happiness they could ever wish for.
Pete and Kathy.
Cheers, guys.